Welcome to Winter Works. This is our fourth workshop, and I'm excited to be here. I call it Winter Works because we're heading into fall and winter in our part of the world, and this capsule series is going to focus on warmer fabrics, but we have an audience all over the world, and some of you don't have the winter that we are going to have, apparently. And so you could make a lot of these pieces in much lighter fabrics. And as we go through the pieces, I will reference some of the lighter fabrics that you can use. So today, our first episode, we're focusing on knits. And lovely. And knits are so lovely for the fall and winter because they're cozy, and who doesn't love throwing a nice oversized sweatshirt or a t-shirt over a pair of pants, in style, of course. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the different knits. So one of our patterns that come with the series is called the WHINNEY Sweatshirt. And it is lovely, and it can be made in two different lengths, which we will be focusing on in a little bit. It has a sleeve. It's fairly oversized, but not crazy. It's sort of straightish, and then it's not sort of A-line at the back. And then it has this sort of ribbing effect in the back, like a traditional sweatshirt. You just put a piece there that's optional. And then the front has these pleats in it, which are just below the waistline, and we can lift that. This is big on me, so for me, I would lift I would make a smaller size, so this actually lifts. So this is a lovely piece, and then we're going to be looking at a hack on the Phoebe pants, and you're going to love these pants. They're not the boy pant, which I've mentioned in the intro, but another surprise, and I wear them all the time. And then we're going to be focusing on our sleeveless tank, which is fabulous, and this is the shape. And if you look, it's got a lot of dots, so it's given a knit piece a lot of shape. Even though knit hangs, it's with the dots, it just gave it a little bit more shape and interest. And I'll be sharing the solid version that we'll be making today. And then we'll be looking at a simple t-shirt. So it's a sleeve, sort of an oval neckline. Made this neckline a little bigger. It's all about what you want. There are no dots in the t-shirt, so it's all about measurements. This one has a stretch to it, so we'll talk about stretch. This one does not have a stretch, so we had to make it a little larger to fit. So that pattern is also part of the Winter Works series. For lighter fabrics, I mean, the t-shirt, you could make the t-shirt in a very lightweight knit. And like I'm wearing, and this is also a mesh that I'm wearing, so you could have a 3/4 sleeve. And even in the summer, if you always like to have a sleeve, this is a really handy piece because it can be worn under everything. And as you know me, like I would never wear this on its own, but some of you would like to do that. It all depends on how you like to wear your clothes. And this piece is so great because you can wear the long sleeve piece underneath it. So this fabric is a poly knit, and I accidentally ordered it, but I'm glad I did because I worked with it to see how it sews, and it almost feels like a swimsuit fabric. So if you're looking for swimsuit cover-ups and that kind of thing, it's kind of fun. I don't know how hot this would be, so we're going to find out. Now, when you order a polyester, actually any printed knit, it's going to be white on the back side. So when you think about your projects, you want to think about that. I did make this piece in that fabric, And you can see, you can see right, the inside, you can see that it's, the white, except the way it hangs, I think will be safe. And the back hangs fairly straight, so we're not going to see any of the white there. I think that print looks really fun on that shirt. I would order the organic cotton the next time. And when you're ironing polyester versus an organic knit, the difference is, you can see it, the polyester just doesn't fold. It's a little awkward to use. Some people like it. I'm not a fan. The next fabric here is the organic knit, and I'm actually making the sleeveless piece in this fabric, and it's lovely. So it's a lightweight knit, and the tank is in a very simple, it's a very simple piece. It's got side inserts, and it has the darts like I showed you on the printed piece. But because this is a solid, I decided that I wanted to give it a little texture. So I placed the pleats on the outside of the fabric, which I think is really fun and adds a little texture and flavor to the garment. So that is our lightweight knit, and this is a great piece for the summer as well. I actually have a cream one in that, creamy gray. This is a knit. It's got some spandex in it, so this is a little heavier than this knit. And this is really beautiful also for a sweatshirt or a t-shirt. It's fabulous for even pants. So we're going to be making the Phoebe hack out of these pants today. So I'm excited about those because those pants are awesome. And then I just wanted to share this piece. This is actually not a knit. This is a piece of really lovely wool and cashmere. So our sleeveless tank could be made out of something like this. It would be just so beautiful with a long sleeve tee underneath, and for a cold wintry day, I think that would be a lovely take on it. So this piece is very versatile and in the different fabrics, and you could make it out of linen, woven cotton, even a voile, which would be really fun for summer. The sleeveless tank is called the Rebel, which I think is very appropriate because there's so many things you can do with the Rebel. So the shape is pretty simple. It's got a curvy shoulder seam, so it kind of forms sort of a semi-sleeve almost. And then the armhole is created by sewing the inserts attaching to the sides. So the panel, when you've got your panels all cut out, so you've got the front and the back, and you've got four pieces that make up the sides. So you're going to add those pieces on each side. But before you sew anything together, there's a lot of dart work to be done. So on my ironing board, I place the pieces down, and I mark where the darts are going to be. Now I'm just doing this on the fly. So you would take your pattern piece and you would mark where those darts go according to the pattern. Just chalk them up or use your pins and then proceed to sewing. Got it? Okay. So now you're going to sew your fronts, all your pieces together. So you're going to sew your sides onto your fronts, and then you're going to sew the sides onto the back. So you have a 3-panel front and a 3-panel back. And this is what it should look like. On this piece, like I said earlier, I did the darts on the outside. I think it gave it a little bit more flavor considering I'm using just a solid knit. And this piece can be done in an array of fabrics, like I said, and I'm just thinking about the art gallery knit fabrics. They are so beautiful, and this would be a really fun piece for anyway. This is such an easy, great, versatile piece, and it has a lot of flavor, and it has a lot of personalized details in it that you could cut the sleeve larger. There's a whole lot of things you can do, which I include in the pattern. So once these pieces are done, now we're going to stitch on our binding. But before we do that, we've got some pressing to do. For the binding of the rebel, I cut the binding on the bias for the neck and the armholes. And you'll see when you press it, it goes really smoothly. It's not going to curl up. And remember, when you're pressing, you don't want to run the iron over because the knit will stretch. For the binding along the bottom of the rebel, I actually cut the strips across the grain, and this just gives a little bit more structure for the bottom of the garment. You will then tuck in the sides and press the binding flat with the right sides facing out. On this piece, I felt that because the polyester didn't sit very flat, I decided not to put the ribbing on the bottom. So I just hemmed it, and it came out quite nice. But you'll see when we add the ribbing onto the bottom of this piece, it gives it a little bit more of a sweatshirt flavor. So I'm binding the neckline of the rebel, and we've done binding before, so I'm not going to bore you with too much of that, but just briefly. So I had cut a few pieces on the bias, but they were not long enough to go all the way around the neck. So I have a little bit of a trick that I joined it, but I'm not going to put that sort of center of my neckline. So I'm just going to put that off center of the back of my neck, and I'm going to carry on round so that the end is relatively in the same position as the join, and then I will cut off this end. I snip them off. So now that is my add-on piece right there. So that's going to be centered on my back of my neckline instead of having it randomly placed. So that's just if you don't have a length long enough for your neckline. What we're going to do is sew the binding onto the neckline, right sides together. You're going to measure and join the back so it fits properly. Stitch that together and finish pinning it in place. Stitch it and then press it upward, and you're going to top stitch it down. You could use a strip of binding, which I will do, just to hide that raw stitched line at the back of the t-shirt. It just gives it a more finished look. You'll do the same with the armholes as you do with your neck. You don't have to cover the stitching. And then we're going to add on our binding, which is very simple, on the bottom. You're going to add it on, right sides together, and then it's going to fold over, and you're going to top stitch that down. So let me finish this off for you and share what I've done. I finished it. I added binding onto the armholes, and I did the neckline the same way. I added the little bit of binding there that I'll share in a bit. On this one, because it was a solid color, I did the pleats on the outside, or the darts, on the outside to give it some texture in the solid fabric. It's a big, long, open t-shirt. It's really fabulous. Wear a long sleeve shirt underneath it. Really cool piece. And here was the one in the print. And this one we didn't put binding on the bottom. This one we did. That's a preference, also a matter of the fabric. And we did the binding on the sleeves of this one too. And this fabric is available on Spoonflower, this print. But don't order the polyester again. Order the organic cotton. And we'll put a link in the workshops area. So I'm excited to put this on, actually. I think this is a fabulous piece. And you can make it in many ways. You can even make this piece in velvet and maybe just use linen and bind the sleeves, but then fold in the linen so that it's inside. It always gives it a really beautiful look. You could even do the binding, this binding on the bottom hemline, velvet with the linen. Great for the holidays. And also for you in the warmer countries, what a great piece. Make this in light linen or a light t-shirt. Wear one of our casual pants underneath it, and you're going to look fabulous. Here's the Phoebe pattern, and we're going to be making a hack from the pants. And if you look at the pattern, you've got your pant piece, and then we've got these two side panels that are cut on the fold. We have our pockets, and then I literally got this out of 54-inch wide. I cut out ruffles, so we're going to be adding onto the bottom of the pant. I'm placing the pockets onto my Phoebe pants, and they go onto the pant side as well as the side panel. So I am just going to place them right sides together in the same spot. Just follow the pattern for where it goes. I'm just eyeballing it like I usually do. And these pants are so great. So I have these pants in a heavy jersey fleece, which are so wonderful in the winter, I can't tell you. And I did a linen ruffle at the bottom. So I had the knit with the linen. So these pants come together pretty easily. You've got your panel, very much like the Cleo's pattern that we did in the first workshop, without the bottom piece that we pleated. Very simple line, very similar line. So I did, it's a baggy pair of pants. They're supposed to be. So there's an elastic channel that you do. You just fold it down. And if you wanted to finish the edge of your knit with a binding, you could just stitch it on the edge and then sew it down. It gives it a nice look. I did not. I just ran this through the serger. And so now we're ready to put on our ruffles, which I just did. And when you're ruffling, you can, I did one section of, I cut them into, there's 4 pieces. So for each leg, I did a ruffle that was very tight, and then I did a ruffle that is a little looser. So I'm going to do the looser one. You can see the difference. So here's one. This is a little looser. And there's the tighter one. So I'm actually going to put the tighter one on the outside of the pant leg. Just for fun. You don't have to do it the way I did it. You can do it all evenly. I'm also just going to overlap my pieces. This one needs to be cut. And because it's knit, I'm not going to bother with the edges here. I'm just going to leave it as they are. You could join them so that they fit properly. So we're on the outside leg, which is the fold of that long strip that we had on the side panel. See how pockets fit nicely there. So I'm going to fold this in half. And I've lost my pins again. And then I'm going to pin it onto the outside of my pant leg. Before you do this, you need to make sure that you have the right length because we're adding a 5-inch or really 4-inch ruffle on the bottom of the pant leg. So you don't want these to really, you don't want the ruffle to be ankle length. You want it to sit a little bit above the ankle. And it's a wide leg pant, so it'll give it some movement. So I am pinning my ruffle onto my pant leg. right sides together. You could do this the other way, where the ruffle piece, you could add it on straight like this to give you that double ruffle on the top and the ruffle on the end. But I'm choosing to actually stitch it on. Gives it a little bit of a finished look. This ruffle is a bit of a surprise on a knit pant. And these would be great in linen for those of you who live in your tropical climates. That is a tighter one. This is a less tight ruffle. So that's the one I'm going to put on the other side. Right sides together. And this goes onto the inner seam leg, which we did. Follow the instructions. So easy, these pants. It's all in the little details that we add. And I love these pants with their pockets. They truly are a must. And knits are also great to travel with. You know, if you're going away for the holidays to see family, these pack great. And with your capsule wardrobe, you will be comfortable just throwing on what you've made. So there I've pinned it on, and you'll see this creates quite a statement. Almost like the plinker pant, but with a different look. The WHINNEY sweatshirt is so fun. The original one we made, after we had tested the pattern, of course, is in a knit. So this is not like a t-shirt fabric. This is more like an actual knitted fabric. And this is a really beautiful one I found, and it's actually rare to find them. So if you wanted to make this in a knit fabric, almost like a sweater, that works really well. Today we're going to be making it in, I found this cotton. It's got a little bit of acrylic in it, and it's quilted. So it's really beautiful. I don't know if the camera is going to pick that up, but as we sew along, maybe you'll see some of the quilted surface. But it's a nice weight. It's stretchy, but not too stretchy. My wish is that it just had some fleece on the back, so that we could make it a real sweatshirt. It's hard to find sweatshirt fabric. And I like sweatshirt fabric that has if it's black, I want the black fleece on the inside, not a white fleece, and that's hard to find. So the WHINNEY is made from a front bodice panel, and it has a set-in sleeve. It has a cuff, like a sweatshirt cuff, and I'm going to show you how to do that. It has a skirt front, and this skirt, you can modify it and not have the pleats. You could just have it hang straight. There are some options with the pattern. You could also cut the front of the pattern just straight down, so there's no add-on. So you just have a straight front. And then the back panel it's got a nice shape, and it has the back ribbing along the bottom. And then there's a little trick to the side. We stitch it together, and then we stitch the skirt panel on, and we have this like little opening at the bottom, which is really cool. So I have cut out each piece for our project, including the two sleeves. Here they are. Make sure you like the length of the sleeve. The shoulder of this piece hangs off the shoulder a little bit, so it's a little bit of a wider shoulder. Remember, we're going to be adding on a cuff, which will be, folded in half, so it's about 3.5 inches. This is the bias binding for the neckline. This is the rib panel that will go along the bottom of your front, or your back, excuse me. This is the skirt panel. this is the, oh, I like this fabric. This is the front bodice. Now, I cut the front bodice. You'll notice on the pattern there are 3 different levels. So because I am small busted, I wanted to make this a shorter version. So there is a couple of versions here. So you can adjust the height of where that skirt's going to sit on your body. This one sits lower, but if you have a bigger bust, it's going to sit very differently on you than it would on me. On here, I'm going to have it sort of right on my waist. I could have lowered it, I could have made it higher, or I could have had it just above my hip, like this one is. Or I could cut it in one piece to make it more like a sweatshirt. But it's really fun with its skirt panel, so we're going to do that. And then the back, you can see, has shape to it. It's got a nice shape that keeps everything together. When the side seams are sewn on, it just sort of pulls it in a little bit, and then it'll have its cuff on the bottom. Okay, so we cut the ribbing slightly smaller than the edge of the piece, same with the cuff, and then we do a little stretching on the ribbing to make sure that the edge of the garment fits into the ribbing. So that's a little trick we're going to do. Inset sleeve, we've done that before, and then the cuffs. So let's get started. First thing we're going to do is make the pleats in our skirt panel so that it fits onto the width of our front bodice. So because we didn't include the actual rectangle in the pattern, to save paper, I instruct you on how to make the pleats. So to make the pleats, you're going to make deep pleats that are 2 inches to 3 inches deep, depending on your size and how wide the instructions have told you to cut according to the size you've chosen. I kind of am a random pleater, so that's what I'm kind of doing here, and I'm going sort of in one direction. In the pattern piece, on the sample piece, you can see that we went out this side, and then we have sort of random arbitrary pleats. But for the sake of this demonstration, I'm just doing some very simple straight pleats all the way along. And use your measuring tape to make sure that you've got somewhat of an even piece. But in the instructions, we give you precise directions for where to place your pleats. Okay, so now that I have my pleats in place, and they all lay straight down, almost like a schoolgirl skirt pleat, evenly going around. But they're deep, so that's why it gives it, the deeper the pleat, the flatter it lays. So if you had a bunch of little pleats, it's going to give a ruffly effect, whereas these pleats, because they're deeper, will lay straight. The next step is we're going to add the bodice onto the skirt. Actually, you're going to baste the pleats in place. Then we're going to put the bodice in place, and you can do this right sides together, and it'll give it a finished front. In our example here, we place the pleat on top of the edge. If you're going to do that, you're going to finish the bottom edge of your bodice, and then you're going to pin your skirt right on top of your bodice to give it that sort of raw edge and give it that, so it has this sort of dramatic little detail right there. So we will do that. The next piece of the project is your back panel and preparing your back panel. So what we're going to do is you're going to finish the sides. So on the binding, you're going to fold it in half, and then right sides together, and you're going to sew the short ends together. Then you're going to clip your corners just slightly. Don't clip your stitches, and then turn it. Made binding for this. I couldn't find one long enough at my local shop, so that's what it's going to look like. You're also going to press it so it's nice and flat, and then we're going to add it onto our back. But before we do that, we're actually going to stitch down 3 inches, like hemming, 3 inches of our back panel. So let me pin that and show you. Same on the other side. You're going to baste that in place so that it stays folded like that. Now you're going to place your ribbing onto the back panel, and you're going to stitch and maintain that fold in the back panel there. So I put the sleeves in, and then I stitched the underarm. And in the instructions, it shows you how to pin the arm where the sleeves end precisely, and then you're going to stitch underneath the sleeve and then downward. When you get downward, just check the pattern. Now we've got our back folded backward. The seam allowance is folded back, and then we stitched our binding in place. On the front end, you're going to stitch just before that binding, so there's about 2 inches open there, forming this sort of opening. And you're going to press your seam allowance open, and then you're going to hem the front piece. So we're going to roll that and just stitch that down. And then you're going to hem your front. That's all you're going to do, is hem it. In this case, we left the bottom raw and just ran a stitch all the way around. And it came out quite beautifully. This piece can also be made in linen, which would be delightful in a light linen. Let's see, I wouldn't make the cuffs on the sleeves, or I'd make it in linen and you can buy ribbing and add the ribbing to, imagine a white linen top like this with white ribbing cuffs and the back. Could be really cute. So, and you can make your own ribbing out of any knit fabric with a little stretch to it. So we're going to stitch those down, hem those, and the cuffs. So the cuffs are very simple. We cut them in, on the fold. It's basically a rectangle, and then I folded them in half, right sides together, and stitched it together. So it forms this tube. Now I'm going to pull these together so that they create a cuff. I'm putting the wrong sides together, and the right sides are facing outward. So I'm matching my edges, and now we have our little cuff. So the cuff, again, is smaller than our sleeve edge, so we're going to actually stretch the cuff so that it fits into the sleeve. Right sides together, and then you're going to flip it to flip it up, and it'll be perfect. And then we're going to do the binding of the neckline. So I'll see you in a minute. So I placed one of the cuffs on, and I'll share that with you in a minute. But this is the result. And you can see when you stretch the fabric, it gives it that nice, very simple to do sweatshirt cuff look. And this is in the same fabric. I didn't use any special ribbing. So we're going to put our cuff on the sleeve, and we folded it in half. Right sides are facing outward. I've got my seams together here, and you've pressed this nice and neat. And then I'm going to just slide my sleeve right onto the cuff, and I'm going to put the the seam of the cuff onto the lower seam of the sleeve, if I can find it. There it is. I think I had it right the first time. So you pin that there, so it's all pinned together, seam to seam, right sides to right sides, and then you're going to continue pinning, but you're going to somehow just stretch that inside fabric, and you'll see, because there's some give to the fabric, it actually works. Make sure you're stretching the cuff and not the sleeve fabric. And then you sew it on. And you will get your cuff. And the final stage, I did hem the front. And my back is looking good. And I made, this fabric is a little thick, so it does, and it's fresh, so it just needs, I didn't launder this fabric before I used it, so it is a little stiffer. But this will hang once it's pressed better, and you can see its little slit. It's a nice little technique. And then in order to do your binding, so binding, a lot of you have asked me how I do my binding. So I always get my binding piece and I measure it onto my garment. I find the center point of my binding and my center front of my top. Notice my voice goes up when I'm teaching. That's funny. Okay, so I match the front of my binding, center front and center front together. And I will pin those together. And I'm just measuring, so I'm just putting it on here. So I then continue measuring around. I need more pins. And I'll continue to the center back. And when I reach the center back, and continue pinning all the way around your neck. I marked the center back of my shirt here. And my binding is coming towards there, so that's where my join line for my binding is going to be, at the center back. And I'm going to mark that. I'm just going to throw my pins around too. And then I'm going to pin that seam line together, right sides together. So now I unpin it, because now I know that it's going to fit my neckline. I'm going to sew the edges together to form the binding. And then I'm going to trim off the excess, which is this. And then I'm going to fold my binding in half this way, right sides out, and we're going to put it onto the garment. Easy peasy.